Okay. Well, this morning we're going to be in Leviticus mostly. I think there's going to be a verse or two in Deuteronomy. Um, and we are going to look at atonement, or at actually how to get atonement. There are the English word atonement, actually, you can break it down at one-ment. And this is all about the offerings that God put forth in the Old Testament to rejoin Israel and Him, to rectify the relationship. And I never thought that I would be talking about this. Um, and as I know a couple of you will easily figure out, yes, I listened to a podcast about it. And I never thought, and if you tell somebody, I listened to this podcast on Leviticus, and man, it was great. There's nobody here going, oh yeah, sign me up for that one. But it really, they made Leviticus interesting. And I never looked at Leviticus as a book you could say, that's interesting. But some of the things that came to light for me in it, I hope to be able to share with you. I learned something, and hopefully you will too. But in Leviticus, one thing, and I think there's a couple of things important to bring up front. In Leviticus 17:11, God states, "For the life of the creature is in the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement for yourselves on the altar. It is the blood that makes atonement for one's life." And there's a couple important things in that verse. One of them is that it is the blood. But the other one is, and I think one that is kind of overlooked sometimes, I have given it to you. God never asked anybody to sacrifice something He didn't give them. And that as we look through these, I think that's an important thought to keep in the back of your mind. Because I know in my mind sometimes I think, well, if you didn't have it, how can you give something you don't have? I also didn't realize some of the rules or around the different sacrifices that we'll get to. But the Hebrew word for atonement is kippur. I'm saying it wrong, as in Yom Kippur. I think we've all heard of that holiday. Comes around on our calendar every year. That is the Day of Atonement, and and it really actually means two things: one, to repay a debt, and two, to purify. Whether we're talking about a Levitical sacrifice or Jesus' death on the cross, atonement is not simply an event that happens. It's a life of a blameless representative taking our place or coming to God, before God for us. So in Leviticus, they describe 5 offerings, 5 sacrifices. And these are used in some of them happen on the Day of Atonement, but some of them happen at different times of the years. They have festivals, and it can be, because they're mentioned multiple times, I always thought there were more. I obviously never counted. I don't know how many of you have, but there is a gift. There is an ascension offering, a gift offering, a peace offering, a purification offering, and a guilt offering. And these are all about correcting a wrong that has been committed by Israel and then re-entering the relationship with Yahweh. And the animal that is chosen to enter God's presence, because that's what the sacrifice does, were not animals that upon which Israel sinned. They didn't have any sin on them. There was one animal in the Bible that they placed a sin on. Who knows that one? What's that? The scapegoat. That's where they took the sins of Israel and put it on that animal, but they didn't sacrifice it. There was 2 goats, and they drew lots for them. I thought that was weird, but I don't know why, but they did. But they drew lots for these goats, and one of them got the sins put on it, and the other one was just blameless, and it was a sacrifice. The ones with the sins put on it was sent out away from the camp. Never was an animal sacrificed that wasn't unblemished, and it was a sinless animal. So it did no wrong, but really what animals do. I mean, we might say the dog did something wrong, but seriously, you know. Yes, the animals chosen to enter God's presence were always blameless, representative on Israel's behalf. So it's the first 7 chapters of Leviticus that go through these 5 offerings. And some of them are repeated, like they start off telling you about them, and then there's a point where they're actually, in chapter 7, start performing some of them. And that goes through the rest of the chapter. Some of them aren't actually performed until you get into Deuteronomy. That's later. We will, and 3 of the 5, I think, is noteworthy, are for atonement. So they are, because there's been some type of transgression. 2 of them are not. They're offerings that are made out of giving glory to God. There isn't, there's nothing there to, they're not atonement offerings. So the first, an atonement offering, and we'll cover this a little bit, is, okay, the first one is the burnt offering, or the ascension offering, or the going up offering. Different people refer to it at different things. Most of the time in the Bible, you're going to see a burnt offering, and King James is how it's going to explain it. And it actually, I think the Hebrew word is olah, which there's a Spanish word olah too, right? What does that mean? Hello? Okay. So different meaning here, probably different spelling, because I know when I kept getting confused when I read that. It's like, I've heard that word. I had to give it some thought to actually what it was. But it is actual going up. The smoke provided from that comes from the offering, God says, is a sweet smelling savor, and it is actually basically you're cremating the animal. You're changing it. The animal is the smoke. I never really thought about it like that, but you take an animal, you completely burn it up. Where does it go? It turns into ashes and smoke, and it is the actual animal rising up. And the burnt offering was done in the morning and evening to mark boundaries between day and night. With other offerings, we're going to find out the burnt offering is a little bit different. The entire animal is burnt up. There is nothing left. Other offerings, that's not the case. It was only parts of it. And but that makes it the most costly, shall we say, because you don't get anything back. Nobody gets anything out of it. It is completely burnt up. And where, again, other ones, the priest got part of it, and even the person that offered it would get part of it back at times. The altar where this was done was directly in front of the door of the tabernacle. It sat between the people and God. And it gets quite detailed. Does anybody remember what you have to do to an animal to sacrifice it for a burnt offering? I mean, obviously you have to kill it, but it goes pretty far beyond that.
Slit the throat, drain the blood.
Yeah, I mean, that's all. It goes beyond that. Yes, you killed it. You skinned it. You washed it. It gives details on how it's to be washed. And you would quarter it. It wasn't placed on the altar whole. But it was how it was to be cut up, what were to be done with certain parts of the organs, what was to be done with certain parts with the blood, where some of it was sprinkled, some of it was poured, some of it gets, the details are quite lengthy, actually. I was surprised at how far in depth it goes on what exactly has to be done. Anybody know what animals could be offered? Sheep? Goats? I got bull, and I've heard of that. Bull is one, is now, I don't know if that could be oxen and cattle, a ram, a goat, which I think the ram would be a sheep, the goat, okay? Turtle doves or pigeons. And I think, obviously, what would be, do you think the bigger the animal, the bigger the sin? How does that? Yeah, it goes back to what they could afford. It wasn't, because, you think, but, if you're some rich guy, if you're Josh, and just rolling in dough, and his bank account's got more pages than my lesson here, and just you got all them zeros out there, and he brings in a dove. What do you give up? What do you know? Yeah, I guess so. That would be kind of the way of looking at that. It is focused around, again, you go back to God doesn't ask anybody to give anything that he hasn't already given. He did not expect a ditch digger to bring in an ox that he used to pull the cart that he fed his family with. So those things I think were somewhat interesting. But the animal was killed. The blood drained. It was skinned. It was cut into pieces, and it was washed. And I'll start here. Josh, could you read Leviticus 4:7, actually?
Absolutely, sir. Leviticus 4:7 says, "And the priest shall put some of the blood upon the horns of the altar of sweet incense before the Lord, which is in the tabernacle of the congregation, and shall pour all the blood of the bullock at the bottom of the altar of the burnt offering, which is at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation."
So a little bit of the details of what would happen to the animal during a burnt offering. This is the one that you could, quite honestly, if you went into all the details, you'd have spent the whole lesson looking at this one offering. We're going to look at the others in a little more. This was the offering mentioned the most in the Bible. You can just, it starts in Genesis. They did burnt offerings. After details were given in Leviticus, it's just mentioned time and time and time and time again. And but it was again at a much greater cost, and it's kind of compared to the woman who anointed Christ. She broke open that alabaster box. She dumped everything on Christ to the point where the people around her like, man, you could have anointed him with a little bit of that. What are you doing? You just wasted this, and it wasn't a waste. It was such a gracious offering that we're talking about it right now. I got a feeling if she just anointed him like other people would have, it wouldn't have got a footnote. But it was the amount. She had it and she gave it. So the next one, it'll be in Deuteronomy chapter 26. If you could read, Trent, verses 1 through 11. And this is the gift or grain offering. And this is not an atonement offering.
When you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you for inheritance, and take possession of it and live in it, you shall take some of the first of all the fruit of the ground which you harvest from your land, that the Lord your God is giving you, and you shall put it in a basket, and you shall go to the place the Lord your God will choose, to make his name to dwell there. You shall go to the priest who is in office at the time, and say to him, I declare today to the Lord your God that I have come into the land that the Lord swore to our fathers to give us. And the priest shall take the basket from your hand and set it down before the altar of the Lord your God.
So that was a lot. Thank you. But it does give an insight. This offering was it was a thank you offering to God. God gave them this land. Although the details of it were given in Leviticus, that was obviously this is not something that was done until they got into the land that God promised them. And it goes quite lengthy on why they were to give it. And this wasn't a tithe. This wasn't have anything to do with the 10% that they were to give. It was just simply look at what happened to us. Look at the journey we've made, and look at where we ended up. And you gave us all this, and I'm bringing in the first of the fruit. There's a big harvest to come. The very first thing that comes off, some of it goes in. I should have asked. Any questions on the first two? Comments? Silence.
I think sometime, I can't remember the exact locations, but when they went into Israel or the Promised Land, Canaan, some of the countries were to be completely destroyed and some were not. And I think there's a relationship between the areas that were to be completely destroyed and the Olah offering.
Ah,
As in they wouldn't offer any
They
offering
weren't
from
supposed to
that
take
destroyed
anything from that occupation or victory. It was
oh,
all-
they were to kill all the cattle, all the sheep, all the
it was
livestock.
supposed to
Yes.
go to God.
Yeah.
And that's what happened at Ai. The guy took, and that wasn't supposed to take. It was supposed to all go to God.
Saul did something similar. Is that what you're talking about? Didn't he do
Just
something?
blew it.
Oh, okay.
he offered when he wasn't supposed to. But like the man at Ai, Achan, took something it was supposed to all go to God, and he's got some of it in his house.
So it all should have been an Olah.
It should have all been an Olah offering. And it's interesting. Well, when you get, are you going to get to atonement?
Mhm.
Okay, I'll wait for that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's coming at the end, I do believe. Which it's got a few different names as well, but that's probably maybe the most interesting one of that lots of facets there, I guess, things that were interesting. The next one is the peace offering or fellowship offering. I never heard of this. I don't think. I don't know if any of you familiar. Pastor I know is listening to the podcast. Before the podcast.
Pensacola on all offering. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Same. I've heard of it, but I can't really elaborate.
I did. I mean, after reading it a little bit, it kind of there were some things that clicked with me. But this on what was different things that were going on. But the peace offering, the Hebrew word for peace is shalom, and it gives a little bit of a biblical understanding of this word. So, the person presenting the peace offering would place their hands on the animal. This is not an atonement offering, although this may seem similar, because the practice is similar. But the peace offering, the presenter keeps all the valuable meat and shares some with the priest, and they would take it back. And now I read this, and I think it was in the podcast as well, that they would have a feast, and they would invite people, the orphans, the widows, the rest of their family, strangers in the land. Although I must admit I could not find a verse to support that. I did search for that, but the meat was definitely meant to be eaten right away. So we'll read a little bit about it here. It was not something, you didn't take it home, put it in the freezer. It wasn't like you just got to keep it and take it home and stock the shelves. It definitely had to be eaten right away, so it implies that there would have been a gathering.
Well, you can see the genius in that. You start offering, because what are they doing in the wilderness? They're complaining because there's no meat.
Yeah,
And so, let's stock the fridge. We'll go do these offerings that look like we're serving God, but actually we're serving ourselves
yeah,
by stocking the fridge.
yeah. No, for sure. But these, who's ever next, Josh? Um, Leviticus chapter 7, verses 15 through 18.
What are those verses, Mr. Carney?
Leviticus chapter 7, verses 15 through 18.
Thank you.
And the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offerings for thanksgiving shall be eaten the same day that it is offered. He shall not leave any of it until the morning. But if the sacrifice of his offering be a vow or a voluntary offering, it shall be eaten at the same day that he offereth the sacrifice. And on the morrow also the remainder of it shall be eaten. But the remainder of the flesh of the sacrifice on the third day shall be burned with fire. Am I reading to verse 21?
Yeah, maybe, because there was more I meant to put on there.
And if any of the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offerings be eaten at all on the third day, it shall not be accepted, neither shall it be imputed unto him that offereth it. It shall be an abomination, and the soul that eateth of it shall bear his iniquity. And the flesh that toucheth any unclean thing shall not be eaten, it shall be burnt with fire. And as for the flesh, all that be clean shall eat thereof. But the soul that eateth of the flesh of the sacrifice of the peace offerings that pertain unto the Lord, having his uncleanness upon him, even that soul shall be cut off from his people. Moreover, the soul that shall touch any unclean thing, the uncleanness of man, or any unclean beast, or any abominable unclean thing, and eat of the flesh of the sacrifice of peace offerings which pertain unto the Lord, even that soul shall be cut off from his people.
So, there were lots of rules about this, and definitely to eat it on the third day was big time taboo. It sounded like there, as you, Josh, read, there were some pretty serious ramifications if it lasted too long. So I'm not sure where exactly the widows and the orphans thing came in, that you invited these people in, but I'm going to say whatever it was you got back, you ate it pretty quick. Rather, if you had to invite people in to do that, you would. But it was not something that was allowed to last. Also, I think worth noting some things that I read about this. This was a very common practice in the entire region, an offering like this. This was, I don't want to say Israel's version of it, but this is where Paul in Corinthians gets into the whole meat offered to idols thing. That there were other nations around them that did things like this. They would offer an animal, the temple got some, most of it went back to the person that offered it, and they would have to eat it rather quick. There was parties all the time that they would invite people over, and that's where people living later in the time of the Corinthians in Corinth, can you eat this meat? And that is where this whole thing came from, was a similar practice in nations around. Any thoughts? Yeah,
Well, now it made sense before, but it even makes more sense now in that context of this was, because there'd be an association, they would know about our peace offering, but am I supposed to eat his peace offering?
yes,
Because I know where that's going.
yeah,
And that meat wasn't to be idolized, but it meant something.
yes,
And so now I'm taking a meat of something that meant a lot to another guy, but for a whole other reason. And I can see where your conscience would be bothered somewhere. And why God would have to tell you it's okay, because that idol is not.
yeah. Put in that context, it would probably, yeah, I can see where I would give it more thought than I would have. I mean, before you read them verses in Corinthians, and I just always thought, you know, what's the big deal? And maybe I would,
Drive-throughs like the other.
yeah, you know, really, but I don't know. Maybe that would put a little more. Obviously, it was okay to eat it all. You know, got that straight. But it did say, hey, look, if it bothers you, then I'm not going to eat it in front of you. You know, so things to be conscious of with your brethren. But I can see a little bit more where it might bother somebody. I didn't have a memory of this because all in all, it's kind of a neat idea, I think. It could be a reason for a get-together. I don't know. Do Baptists need that? Are we allowed to do something like that?
But it makes you wonder, how often did they do it? Since
Yeah,
they complained in the desert, I know it was before this offering and after, that they didn't have meat.
Yeah. No, you're correct. I don't know how. A lot of these aren't. There's not a lot of them that tell you. I mean, the first fruit offering would be obvious when that would happen at harvest time for whatever crop you may raise, which could be different times for different things. But some of the other ones that didn't. I mean, the burnt offering, they did that in the morning and in the evening, daily, and that could be for different people or different reasons, but it was done twice a day. But the other ones, the grain offering, it doesn't say the peace or fellowship offering. It doesn't say, and it doesn't really say. It does elaborate in what Joshua read that sometimes there could be a reason for it, because it implicated that if this is just done of your own free will, like there could have been a cause for you to do it. Maybe you did something and, I don't know, picked a fight with somebody. I'm not exactly sure what the cause could have been, but it does mention if you did this voluntarily, because I think there were different rules, if I remember. One, it had to be eaten that day, but if it was, in that case, I could see, because it came to my mind, maybe if you took this offering in because you had an offense or somebody got in an argument, maybe no harm was done, but, this is my neighbor, and I'm not getting along with them. Maybe I would do a peace offering and invite them all over. We would share, mend the fence, as it were. Maybe there was a reason to do it. Sometimes it was done voluntary. You had longer to eat the meat. But in one case, it was supposed to be eaten, I believe it said the same day. And the next case, if you did it voluntary, you had 2 days. So,
It's interesting when you think about when they're in the desert, they're coming out of Egypt, and I know they had animals, I know they spoiled the Egyptians, but I would have to think the cattle were rare, few. They're not great herdsmen yet. But by the time you get to Malachi, when they do have an abundance of animals, they're moaning and groaning about doing sacrifices. When they don't have hardly any animals, they're not moaning and groaning. But when they have tons of them, they're complaining. Because God wants not the lame one, God wants the best one. And they're like, can't believe God wants this one. Why can't he take this one? I just find it ironic. In need, we'll give. When we have a bunch, we don't want it.
one of the judges, I remember, made a comment at one point, why don't you go take that to the Syrian that's controlling the land right now? Why don't you go take that animal to him and tell him it's for him for a tax, and let me know what he thinks of it. Because I don't think you'd give it to him,
Something else that I noticed, Mr. Carney, in verse 12, 13, 15, and perhaps there's more, there's also this word thanksgiving. So perhaps an occasion, maybe a birth of a child or a marriage, maybe that peace offering was showing we are thankful for the peace God has given.
It actually is also known as, and maybe I didn't read this up front, peace or fellowship offering. So it can be referred to both ways. Yes. But yes, I don't imagine, and part of my, I think, stigma with the sacrifices as well, because I have in a lot of ways, always had a hard time, I think, of the size of the fire to burn it up. Because the first thing I think of is this big cow. Somebody brought in this 1,200-pound bull, and oh my gosh, where'd they get all the wood? How'd they do this? But oftentimes I think it was a young animal. It was not that big. And especially when they were traveling, when they're out in the wilderness. I don't think they were offering a lot of cattle then either. There was probably more lambs, which are not big. Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. I've often wondered how big the altar was, because I'll admit I don't have a concept of it, and somehow in my mind I feel like the permanent one in Jerusalem probably got bigger than maybe the one they traveled with, but there were things about it that have still kind of can capture the imagination, as it were. But
Mr. Carney, one last question, if I may.
yes,
In Psalm 23:5, David says to Yahweh, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." Do you know if he's talking about a peace offering with them?
I know I cannot honestly answer that one.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll do this. Here is a sample altar.
Does it give measurements?
Just look at it.
That is huge. Look at that. People
Oh,
being
wow.
behind.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty big.
So, sorry.
No, it's quite all right, because I've often wondered how big it was. That looks pretty permanent. I don't think they were toting that around in the wilderness, but
That was a pagan one,
okay.
to be clear, but to give us an idea, that you can't find one in Israel, an Israeli one.
Because it'd have to be at the temple.
It'd have to be, yeah. So they just wanted to show us what that looked like. So you can see how they can put multiple offerings on that. Which we should remind ourselves, that's what Mary and Joseph offered.
Turtle doves.
Turtle
Yes.
You saw it, right?
So online at Torah.org, it says that the altar in Moses' tabernacle, so not the temple, but the tabernacle was 8 by 8 feet. While the altar in Solomon's temple was over 30 by 30 feet.
Which is more of this.
Yeah.
30 by 30. Wow, 10 by 10 yards.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big altar.
Well, and not only that, but you get into how'd they clean it? I mean, this isn't exactly a mess-free process, I guess you would say. I mean it. No. So how am I doing? I'm doing okay. The fourth offering that we are going to look at is called the sin offering or the purification offering. Not to be confused with the guilt offering, or the trespass offering, which will be the fifth one. But this is, there are some circumstances given here. In Leviticus chapter 4, verses 3 through 6. Who's next? If somebody could, is it the next Josh? Because we're going to bob along here in a minute. Yes, chapter 4, verses 3 through 6.
If it is the anointed priest who sins, thus bringing guilt on the people, then he shall offer the sin that he has committed. A bull from the herd without blemish to the Lord for a sin offering. He shall bring the bull to the entrance of the tent of meeting before the Lord, and lay his hand on the head of the bull, and kill the bull before the Lord. Then the appointed priest shall take some of the blood of the bull and bring it to the tent of meeting. And the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle part of the blood 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil of the sanctuary.
Okay, so we're going to look at 3 of these circumstances where this offering, this sacrifice would take place. The next one would be Leviticus 4, verses 13 through 21. Actually, 13 through 17, if you would, Bob.
And if the whole congregation of Israel sinned to Israel, and the thing be hid from the eyes of the assembly, when they have done somewhat against any of the commandments of the Lord concerning things which should not be done, and are guilty. When the sin which they have sinned against it be known, then the congregation shall offer a young bullock for the sin, and bring him before the tabernacle of the congregation. And the elders of the congregation shall lay their hands upon the head of the bullock before the Lord, and the bullock shall be killed before the Lord. And the priest that is anointed shall bring of the bullock's blood to the tabernacle of the congregation.
17, if you would.
And the priest shall dip his finger in some of the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord, even before the babe.
Okay, and then the last one I wanted to look at is Leviticus chapter 4.
Excuse me, Bob.
Yes,
Can I ask Joshua and Jasmine a question?
certainly.
In verse 14, when the sin which they have sinned against is known, then the congregation, okay, what word is that in Spanish? Okay, shall offer the young bullock and bring him for the tabernacle of the congregation. Is that the same word or a different word? Okay, I think that we need to understand why this is going on, because I don't think it comes across to us in well in English by the congregation, the meeting of congregation. It's the place of meeting, and so all this is going on so that we can have a meeting with who?
With God.
With God. And I think that word, so it's 2 different words. Whereas King James has chosen to translate it the same word, it's really the tent of meeting. God is providing a place for the sacrifices, so we don't lose sight of the whole purpose of all this.
Correct.
It's
Good.
so that we can meet. Sorry.
That's all right. No, good point. Leviticus chapter 4, verses 27 through 30. Yeah, I guess. That would be good. Almost forgot about you sitting up there. Sorry.
If any member of the community sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in the Lord's commands, and they realize their guilt, and the sin they have committed becomes known, they must bring as their offering for the sin they committed a female goat without defect. They are to lay their hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it as a place for burnt offering. Then the priest is to take some of the blood with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour out the rest of the blood on the base of the altar.
Okay, so there are some similarities here, and then there are some differences. Anybody notice any? As in,
Where he takes the blood upon his finger and then brings it and sprinkles it on the altar.
in the first two, they actually go in. When it is the priest or the whole congregation, he actually takes the blood in. But when it's just one person, they don't. The blood never leaves the altar.
This one's also a female, the others were males.
Yes. don't want to tell you I understand why. I don't know, but if it was the priest or the whole congregation, there's also the, when it's an individual or the congregation, what the sin was through what? Yeah, yeah. In other words, somebody came up and said, "Do you know?" And you're like, "Ah, no, I didn't. Wow, I didn't realize that. It was you didn't know. It's through ignorance." It doesn't say that about the priest. It just says if he sins. I guess because he shouldn't have been ignorant. How else do you take that? The priest should have known. But the other, for this particular offering, for the individual and the congregation, this is through ignorance. So I kind of thought that was interesting. I thought the female was interesting because it doesn't usually call that out. And I thought that was interesting as well. And that when it was the priest or the whole congregation, blood was actually taken in before the Lord and sprinkled 7 times. But it was an individual, it never left the altar. I'm not quite sure of the differences there, on why one, but the rules to some of these there's a reason Leviticus is monotonous to read, because the rules can get so in depth at times you just think. There was actually, I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of the altar, but there was a horn at each corner, they called it. I'm not sure what the purpose of it was. Yeah, I don't know. Anybody got that?
I'm not sure completely, but I think it had something to do with strength. Because you could go grab the horns of the altar and get, what's that? Sanctuary.
Yeah, because when Solomon was chasing down one of his brother held the horn of the altar,
Yeah.
asking for mercy.
It has, I think, but I'm not sure, it has something to do with strength. Like the horn of a bull, that's what he's going to use to gore somebody. Their strength.
And didn't David talk about the horn of my salvation?
Yeah.
I think that's also a reference to it.
That should be the next podcast.
Yeah, horns on the altar.
Horns on the altar? I'm quite sure. I do believe horns obviously were a sign of strength, but I'm not exact. I couldn't have told you why. I knew that they were on the altar, but I didn't know why.
And those differences may just be God's way of saying this is a unique offering. And so using the female and not going in or out might just be the way of highlighting that this is unique.
Yeah.
So pay attention to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't get slothful in your offerings.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're time for one more, hopefully. Now this one is the last one, would be the trespass offering, also known as a silt or a guilt offering, a sin or a guilt offering, and this one is an atonement offering as well. And if we could read Leviticus 5:6, and then the next person pick up 5:18. Yeah, chapter 5, verse 6. Yes.
And he shall bring a ram without blemish out of the flock, with thy estimation, for a trespass offering unto the priest. And the priest shall make an atonement for him concerning his ignorance, wherein he erred and wist it not, and it shall be forgiven him.
So these two, one says sin, one says trespass, and they, this is all a facet of the same offering, but one says female and the other one says ram. And I found that interesting. Now, this could perhaps depend on the offense. It doesn't go into that quite that much detail. In Leviticus 4, actually, just Pastor, if you would read Leviticus 14:13 and 14:14. Leviticus 14:13 and 14:14.
And he shall lay the lamb in the place where he shall kill the sin offering and the burnt offering in the holy place. For as the sin offering, the priest, so is the trespass offering, it is most holy. And the priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and the priest shall put it upon the tip of the right ear of him that is to be clean or cleansed, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot.
Okay, what is that about? I'm hoping for a scholar here to fill me in.
What verses were those again?
14, 13, 14. I think that represents your strength, because most people were right-handed, and you take off this, your thumb and your toe, and you've really debilitated a person.
Okay. Never thought, I thought there had to be something to it, but I got to admit that caught me off guard. Anybody remember reading that before and thinking, yeah, it's definitely not the everyday. But I thought that was kind of unique. And then well, I don't know about your well, they probably wore sandals. I was going to say I don't know about your toe, but maybe maybe it was. Maybe you had to wear it for a while, and that could be.
All dusty by the time you got to where
Yeah, that is true. But the ear and the thumb probably would have wore off pretty quick. But the ear, yeah, I don't know. Okay. Okay. One thing also about this offering is this could be you could have sinned against God or you could have sinned against another person, which was taken seriously because we are the image of God. And one last, I think, to read Leviticus chapter 6, verses 1 through 7. Yes.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, If a soul sin and commit a trespass against the Lord, and lie unto his neighbor, in that which was delivered him to keep or in fellowship, or in the thing taken away by violence, or hath deceived his neighbor, or have found that which was lost and lieth hidden, and sweareth falsely in any of all things that a man did, seeing therein, then it shall be, because he has sinned and is guilty, and he shall restore that which he took violently away, or the thing which he had deceitfully gotten, or that which was delivered him to keep, or the lost thing which he found. How far did you say?
Through verse 7.
Or all that which, or about which he hath sworn falsely. He hath even restored in principle, and shall have the fifth part, more thereto, and give it unto him who hath it permanently, yea, his passing offering. And he shall bring his trespass offering to the Lord,
No, good, thank you. So if Josh lost his wallet and I said, hey, dude, I found your wallet. Man, there wasn't anything in it. Hope you were broke when you dropped it, and pocketed the $200, and I got caught lying. I had to pay him back the $200 plus a fifth. Yeah, plus a fifth. There was also, and I didn't include it, and I probably should have. There was something if you did something else where you had to give so many pieces of silver, which I thought was odd because it was like a fine. And but not. I guess I don't want to leave you out. Hebrews 14:21, because there is, as I said in the beginning, what would happen if you didn't have any money, and you couldn't afford anything. Leviticus. Oh, I'm said Hebrew. Where did I get that at? Leviticus 14:21. Yeah, no, it's Leviticus 14:21. I don't know where that came from in my mind. Sorry.
Just verse 21.
Yeah.
And if he be poor and cannot get so much, then he shall take one lamb for a trespass offering to be waved to make an atonement for him, and 1/10 deal of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering, and a log of oil.
Not exactly sure what a log of oil is. Must have been a measurement of something, but it does. There are provisions for people that don't. Yes. Oh, okay. There's all kinds of old measurements that I wish that I knew. But anyway, so each of the offerings that we, here are talked, they're all about correcting about re-entering a relationship, and the details on how they're given and when they're to be offered are pretty interesting. But I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah. Yeah. Josh, would you close?
Yes, absolutely. Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for the detail you provide in your word. We're so thankful that you take sin seriously, and that you have offered the greatest sacrifice to cover all sin, which is, of course, is your Son, Jesus Christ. Again, thank you for this time. We are so thankful that he has atoned for our sins, and that through him we have complete and total and secure salvation. This we pray in your Son's name. Amen.